Do you know the sound your name makes when it doesn't come from a mouth? I didn't until the cabin said mine. I rented an Airbnb in the woods because silence sounded like medicine. Reviews called it cozy, secluded, perfect for a digital detox. The photos showed a warm window among pines, a stove, a loft bed. The host messaged, "Key in the lockbox, thermostat at 62, beware raccoons." "In the evenings, you might hear the house settle," she added. "Old timber. It creaks like it remembers you." I told myself houses talk in nails and joints. Nothing more. Night dropped fast. Wind crumpled the windows while I lit a candle and read. The cabin was one room with a ladder to the loft, a short hall to a bathroom with a clawfoot tub. When sleep finally began to pour into me, a sound rose through it, soft, like a page turning behind my ear. Tell. I sat up in the loft, quilt through my chin, heart awake. The rest of my name dissolved. Pipes, I told myself. Wind. I lay there listening to the stove tick and the roof pop. Silence settled around me like heavy snow. In the morning, I found a guest book on the shelf, a cracked leather journal stuffed with Polaroids and pressed leaves. I flipped through entries, stars like holes in the ceiling, saw bear prints, woke at 3:17 to footsteps on the porch, no tracks at dawn. Tucked between pages were offerings, a ribbon, a movie stub, a brittle fern. People wanted to prove they'd been real in the quiet. I left nothing. I hiked the ridge that afternoon. The forest sounded like it was memorizing my steps. On the way back, the cabin hid in the trees exactly like the photo. A bell hung by the door, rope frayed with cold. I rang it once. The sound came out dull, as if swallowed. Dusk iced over the windows. I climbed to the loft and watched the porch light stitch a yellow square into the snow. My phone had no service. The silence was a lake I kept falling through. To make it friendlier, I told the house a story, half aloud. I said, "My grandmother's farmhouse ate voices. You could whisper in the pantry and hear it in the parlor. Hidden vents, old tricks with sound. Filing last night under physics helped." The cabin listened. The stove settled. The roof capped once. I blew out the candle and let the dark take the room. That's when the cabin offered a story of its own, through the guest book. Story 1. The Woman with the Braids. Her Polaroid was glued to the page, scarf, winter grin. She wrote that she slept like a child until the third night when humming seeped from the hallway wall, not in the air, inside the wood. She pressed her ear to the pine and heard her wedding song, off-key and water slow. She followed it to a small square cut out in the paneling, its seams painted over. 4 screws held it shut. Cold leaked through it like a long, inhaled breath, she wrote. She left before it could finish learning her. I ran my fingers along the hall and found the square. 4 painted screws, a faint draft. When I tapped it, the sound went inward instead of outward, as if the wall was a throat. That evening, footsteps scraped across the porch. Light, careful, pacing the boards. I checked the window. Nothing but snow feathering through the glow. The bell rope didn't move. The steps reached the far end and stopped. The wood trembled with a vibration I felt more than heard. Story 2. The boy who wouldn't knock. His cursive leaned like it was running downhill. Spring visit, frogs in the ditch, a thin whistling breath from behind the couch, not words, but the ideas of them. On his last night, something tapped from inside the wall near the guest book. 3 taps, pause. 3 taps, pause. He wrote, "I almost tapped back, but Mom said, never answer a thing that knows your rhythm." He drew a diagram of the hallway square. "It's a mouth," he added. "Don't feed it." I didn't want to think about mouths. I made tea, kept the kettle singing, let steam stand between me and the hush. Still, the wind pressed its face to the glass. The heater coughed and steadied. From the loft, I watched the snow pile rise against the porch. Story 3, sort of. An unsigned entry in a blocky adult hand. There are messages in the studs. Someone tucked their stories inside during the build. If you breathe against the wall, the syllables move. Below it, a sketch of the square, open and dark. I should have left. Instead, I fetched a screwdriver from a drawer with spare batteries and deck screws. The metal felt winter coal against my palm. Somewhere outside, a tree shed its snow with a muted thud. Night folded tighter, layer by layer. Snow should have muffled everything, but it sharpened the silence, honed it thin. I set the screwdriver to the first painted screw. The cabin exhaled, a long wood sigh traveling beam to beam. Under it, almost hidden, my name attempted itself again. Not a voice, not language. The room returning me to myself. Tell. The first screw came free with a rusty squeal, paint flaked like fish scales. On the porch, those light steps returned, slow, measuring, pacing the length of the boards. I held my breath so I wouldn't add sound to sound. The bell rope quivered and went still. Second screw, then third. The fourth wouldn't budge. I pressed, leaning my weight until the tool bit and turned with a grinding scream. The seam loosened. The panel shivered in its frame like a tooth about to give. I hesitated. My reflection wavered in the black window. Candlelight, my face. A darker piece of night outside that didn't move with the trees. The cabin held its breath with me. In the silence that followed, wood grain became text. Lines in the boards read like sentences I couldn't quite understand. I pried my fingers under the edge. Cold air poured through the thin gap. Colder than winter. A cellar kind of cold. Something smelled faintly of damp cloth and metal. Somewhere beneath the boards, a pipe ticked, like a metronome, slow as a heart falling asleep. "Don't be dramatic," I whispered, and the whisper had nowhere to go except into the wood. Behind me, from inside the wall, the whisper finished my name. It said the second syllable softly. I pulled the panel. It came free with a splintery sigh. Behind it yawned a narrow void between studs, black as a well. Cold rolled out, dust sour, faintly sweet. My candle bent toward the dark, as if the cavity were breathing in. I aimed my phone's flashlight. The beam caught spiderweb and 2 glass jars wedged on a ledge, mouths corked. One held a ribbon and a folded paper. The other held a tight loop of magnetic tape on a plastic hub, its little white label worn gray. My name came again, closer, the vowel tuned now. Tal. Ha. Parlor trick, I muttered. Drafts. I slid my hand in and lifted the first jar. The note inside matched the woman with the braids. "If you find this," it read, "don't listen twice." Tucked beneath a pressed fern, he called my name right on the third try. I set it down and lifted the hub. The label held a date and a name from an early guest book entry. Below it, scratched hard enough to scar the plastic, "Listen." Footsteps crossed the porch, slow, counting boards, only there were too many for the length of that porch. I put the hub back and stood in the cold, breathing. The silence had changed. It wasn't absence now, but attention, as if the room leaned toward me. Story 4. The legend, short as a rumor. Locals call this the listening cabin. A logger built tubes into the walls to carry his late wife's voice, waiting for an answer. Blueprints vanished with him. Some say he kept the voices of guests in jars. Some say the house learned the trick without him. I didn't know that yet. What I knew was that the house wanted me to listen. My grandmother's rule rose up. If a thing calls you by name, make sure the mouth belongs to a body. Rooms don't. I slid the panel back and turned 2 screws just enough to hold. Then I took the guest book to the table. A page 3/4 through was missing, torn clean. Beneath the rip, a later line. Police asked about a missing hiker. We said we'd just cleaned. We didn't mention the bell. I looked at the bell through the window. It hung still, and yet the cabin felt as if it were ringing, just past hearing a tremble in the beams. True thing. Years ago, a flyer at the trailhead showed a sun-bleached face and a phone number. I had touched it when I parked. The cabin spoke my name again, both syllables perfect now, my full name. It sounded more like me than I do. I packed. Fast. Book in bag, screwdriver in pocket, boots laced. Outside, the snow had smoothed the path, erasing my inbound prints. The porch steps were a line of shallow bowls filled with new white, as if someone had paced all night and the storm memorized every footfall. When I touched the bell rope, it shivered, a tremor traveling up from the board. Along the underside of the porch, a tar-stiff wire ran to a crack in the foundation. The bell didn't just hang, it listened. I followed the wire to a low hatch. Cold breathed up. Below, a shallow cellar held shelves. Jars lined them. Dozens. Each held an offering, a coin, a page, a shell. A few held spools like the one in the wall. Names bloomed on the labels in old ink, then pencil, then ballpoint. Some matched the guest book. Some didn't. I tried one spool because fear wants proof. I fed the end across a rusted head someone had mounted and cranked. Sound came out thin, like breath through a keyhole. L. U. Ren. Another name. A clipped child's laugh. Between them, the bell hummed, a resonance that made my teeth ache. Then a syllable that belonged to me. Not from tape. From wood. And then my full name. I stopped winding. The sound kept going, moving through beams and joists until it became place instead of noise. The house wasn't replaying. It was learning. Mimicry until mastery. I backed up the steps. The bell rope twitched like a pulse. I got in the car. The engine turned, coughed, died. I tried again. Something walked onto the roof and paced from end to end, making those same too many steps. The house said my name again, casual now, like a friend. Don't answer a thing that knows your rhythm. I sat still until my breath fogged at the glass. The driveway ribboned into trees that seemed to lean in. I left the car and went back inside because I couldn't stand the wall at my back out there. Sometimes danger is easier when you can see the mouth shaping your name. The house waited. At the table, the last page of the guest book held 3 words. Leave something alive. I thought I understood. The jars were trades. If you don't want the house to keep your name, you give it another living sound to hold. Not blood, not anything like that. You give it a voice that isn't yours. The bell. Bells carry names backward into rooms. I took the rope and rang it once, hard. The note stuttered, steadied, and braided itself through studs and the thin spaces where air moves. The cabin exhaled. I felt cool breath on my neck. Somewhere in the wall, something unwound that had been tight for years. The cabin called my name, and I answered, breaking my own rule. Here. For a long beat, the house and I held each other's names between us like a string pulled taut. Then the rope went slack. The air lightened. The sound of my name left the wood and settled back into my chest. I don't think I won. I think I fed it. I think I taught it. At morning, the trees opened only as much as they needed. At the trailhead, the flyer staple had rusted through. The wind peeled the paper loose and took the face away. Now when a room is too quiet, I hear a bell inside my teeth, almost not there. Sometimes the walls of my apartment find the shape of my name and roll it back with an affection that isn't mine. I don't keep jars. I don't keep guest books. If someone says my name from the next room and I know I'm alone, I leave a radio on for the house. I give it something else to hold.